Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to him, the blessed one, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. My utmost respect to the perfectly enlightened Sammasambuddha, the noble doctrine of the Buddha, and the noble Mahasangha, the disciples of the Buddha. Dear Dhamma friends, welcome to our weekly guest lecture series, week 17. It's actually the first week of 2023. I hope everyone have a happy new year. Please mark your calendar every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time to get more benefited from our guest lecture series. Kindly check with Dhamma USA YouTube channel and Facebook page and groups for more updates. You can post your questions on our YouTube channel and Facebook page, and we will answer them at the end of the talk. Topic for today is titled Using Impermanence to Build Your Resilience, presented by our guest speaker, Dr. Margaret Meloni. Dr. Meloni is a business person, Buddhist practitioner, and an advocate for Death Dhamma, which is the practice of inviting the awareness of death into life. Dr. Meloni will share her thoughts on impermanence and how it can perhaps help us to accept death as an essential part of life. Welcome, Dr. Meloni, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for trusting me with your time and your brain space. And together we're going to take a look at using impermanence to help us become more resilient in our lives. And I think I have something to share with you. Let's see. There we go. But not at the end, probably let's start at the beginning, as the saying goes, a very good place to start. So here we are. Happy New Year. Now, every day we face impermanence, whether we acknowledge it or not. And so, of course, I'm asking you to acknowledge it. And how we face it, the ways in which we face impermanence every day, can really help us become stronger, more resilient people, emotionally, and also, of course, in our practice, in our Buddhist practice, right? So it is a new year. Vivi said, Happy New Year, right? It is 2023. It's the first week of the new year. So I'm asking you to consider. You don't have to answer out loud, or you want to answer in the comments, or just think to yourself, has everything gone exactly as you expected? Has every day gone exactly as expected? Did your New Year's Eve go exactly as planned? Or have things been different? It's been a really good week. Things have been different than I expected. I don't know that I expected as much rain. And so for a lot of people here in California, I know we have weather all around the world, but for a lot of people in California, impermanence is really showing up in the way in which the rain is flooding and washing some things away. I saw on the news today that a pier in one of the towns in Northern California, a beach community, part of the pier washed away. My niece had some illness at the beginning of December, and she spent a couple of days visiting the hospital this week. Wasn't expecting that to happen. The good news is she's going home probably right now as we're speaking, and I will get to see her tomorrow. But so things are different, right? So I'm guessing that in your life, things have been different for you as well, right? So I don't know what you thought was going to happen this week, but it may or may not have happened. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm not saying don't make plans. We make plans. And, in part of my other life, as a, business person and entrepreneur, aside from Buddhist practitioner, I actually teach project management academically. And that is all about helping people create plans and creating budgets and creating schedules. So I'm not a person who would say, don't make plans. You're not going to hear me say that. And I'm not going to say it now. We make plans, right? The plans that we make for our week, for our month, for our year, this helps us to navigate, to navigate our lives. So keep making plans. But as you keep making plans, what I'm asking you to think about is to acknowledge that there will be impermanence. And this is why I'm with you today, advocating an impermanence practice. Within your Buddhist practice, make sure, please, that you make room for impermanence and to make a space for it. Because here's the truth. The plans that we make, they're built on an illusion of control, right? A perception of control, an illusion of certainty. When I sat on Sunday and thought about my week and how it was going to go, I didn't think that on Monday evening I'd be learning that my niece was in the emergency room. But that's what happens. And that was something I needed to accept as part of my week. And then I, make changes based on the fact that the plans I created are different. They changed. They're impermanent. And I have no control over that. I have no control over that. And so let's think about that, right? We have no control. And sometimes I use the phrase death with a lowercase d, right? So I'm an advocate for death awareness, like the real death, the end of a life. But when I say death with a lowercase d, what I mean is like these small things that change, because when these small things change and we learn how to work with that change, ultimately, as we're building our strength and we're building our resilience, this helps us get ready for, I'll say, the big D of death of ourselves and others and the loved ones, right? So, you know what? Go ahead and go to your car and expect your car to start, because that's normal. And go ahead and assume the store is going to be open when you go to the store and that they're going to have your favorite ice cream, if that's what you're going to shop for. And go ahead and expect that you can have your morning coffee or tea if that's what you do. Just know that some days we will have loss and we will have disappointment. And that's okay, because this is normal. So like in the course of our lifetime, we're going to experience loss. It might be a small thing, like, not having my favorite ice cream. Hopefully I've evolved enough that that's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. I'm fortunate if I get to eat ice cream at all, right? That's a luxury item, right? So it might be a small thing. It might be something bigger, like your car is broken down, or you're in an accident and your car can't be driven anymore, or you lose a job, or a friendship or a relationship ends. These are things that are going to happen to us. It's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. It's part of the human condition. And every day we have these things that, you might believe this went well today and this didn't go well today, because maybe I'm not always able to access my equanimity, right? If I was always accessing equanimity, I might not even say this went well or this went poorly, I might be able to just say, this went, right? But I'm very human. I'm here with you, just a regular person, striving in my practice, unenlightened. And so I have days where I think something went well, something didn't go as well. And a lot of times when I think something didn't go as well, it might be because it didn't go the way I thought it should. The idea that I had in mind, what I was clinging to, what I was wanting, right? But these experiences, whether it's the car, the ice cream, the friendship, the job, whatever it is, these can really help us face even bigger challenges in your life. And that's what we want to be able to do. So, I've got this quote here from the Pali Canon. And, so there's deeper meaning. And I might be speaking today maybe on a more practical level of accepting impermanence helps us become resilience, which helps us become stronger people. And that's great for the practical functioning of, being a human in the everyday world, especially, I'm a layperson, right? I'm not a monk or nun. But really, if I and all of us, if we can really focus on impermanence, the inconstancy of all fabrications. Look how it says, ignorance is abandoned, clear knowing arises. And what does that really mean? Ignorance is abandoned, clear knowing arises. This is our path to enlightenment. And I'm not in any way am I making the presumption that I'm going to become enlightened in this lifetime. I'm going to keep working. And I'm not in any way presuming that anything I'm going to share with you today is going to bring you to enlightenment, because again, we have our dear spiritual teachers, our monks and our nuns, to teach us this. But focusing on inconstancy, ignorance is abandoned, clear knowing arises. What you and I can do is by really opening up to, embracing, bringing impermanence into our lives, noticing it, having an impermanence practice, we are going to have clearer minds. And yes, clearer minds in a way that hopefully leads to a better spiritual path for us, and also leads to a better way of being human in this world and a better experience of being human in this world. That's what we're after. So let's embrace impermanence. Let's just know that it is there, that it is with us every day, that it's with us, I'll say, at different levels every day. And let's recognize it for the tool that it is, the gift even that it is. So broken plans and disappointments, you go to get coffee and your favorite coffee store has closed, or your favorite ice cream is gone, or you're late for work because your car doesn't start, or because there's bad traffic, or you don't get the promotion that you wanted, or you don't get to spend time with the friends that you wanted, or you wake up sick when you thought you were going to be well. And then we can go, right, more and more of these different things. Each of these can help us create an impermanence practice. So see, every day we're handed these opportunities. And I encourage us all to embrace them, to take them, to not let them slip away, let them slip away. And when you start paying attention, you will just notice how many times during the day you're handed this opportunity to practice in impermanence, and presenting you opportunities for spiritual growth, and then as I've said, to have a better existence as a human in this world. So when we do this impermanence practice helps us create mindfulness of clinging and aversion from, again, small things to big things. I didn't want my niece to be sick. I want her to be getting well. I want her to be able to live a full and happy life. And in my mind, I want her to live to be an old woman. I don't get to control any of that. And you hear me saying, I want. See, it's that wanting. I'm clinging to what I want, a perception of what I want her life to be. And I'm having aversion to considering a life where she may have to deal with an illness, which could be how it is going to be. So we want to create this mindfulness of clinging and aversion so that we can become resilient, strong, able to face what comes our way, because it's coming our way, whether we know it or not, whether we choose to accept it or not, whether we choose to embrace impermanence or not. It's coming. And it's not coming. It's here, right? It's here. That's really the right thing to say. It's here, my friends. So when I say resilience, I mean, the ability to handle adversity and to adapt to that change and move forward and thrive in life. So, we go back to the very first, let me go back to this first picture for a second here. This picture. This man has adapted to the fact he's clearly lost all or part of his legs, I think from the knees down, he's lost his legs. And he's been fitted with, I think we call them blades, right? Prosthetics, and they're blades in their legs. And he is, I'm going to say, thriving because he's out clearly running a race. He is resilient, which is why I use that picture, because I think he is the picture of resilience. And that's what it means. It doesn't mean that, and I don't know him, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't upset. It doesn't mean that he wasn't sad. It doesn't mean that he didn't feel pain or anger or disappointment when he lost his legs. I'm guessing he did. And you and I, when things happen that are difficult, we are still going to have emotions around that. Because again, this is what it means to be a human, unenlightened being living in this world, is to experience and feel sadness, anger, disappointment. And resilience means that we can meet that. We can work with that. And we can adapt and we can thrive. There's a phrase I use. Let me say it this way. There's a phrase I overuse. And the phrase that I overuse is, this is how it is. This is how it is. And that helps me to adapt. When things don't go the way I want, when impermanence enters, this is how it is. This is how it is. My niece returned to the hospital. This is how it is. We don't know 100% sure why. This is how it is. She's going home this evening. Do you see? And this resilience has been found to be the element that makes the difference between someone who loses his legs and gets blades and trains and runs a race versus someone who might not really learn to adapt to the blades and might not learn to walk. Resilience is the difference between someone who loses a loved one and goes on to have a happy life. Doesn't mean there wasn't sadness. Doesn't mean you don't miss that loved one. But resilience is what helps you to have a life and thrive. It's good for our mental and physical well-being. Because as you can guess, when we can adapt, when we can go to, this is how it is. I laugh at myself when I say that because I have friends who tell me, please stop saying that. And you can tell I'm not a very good listener because I keep saying, this is how it is. When we can do that, or the phrase that makes sense to you, it helps alleviate stress because it brings us ease. And then when it helps us eliminate stress and we come from a place of ease and acceptance, this is also good for our physical health. It means we have lower blood pressure. It means we are less likely to have ulcers and upsetting and losing our temper and other things. So resilience is very important. I often think of resilience as almost as a form of equanimity. And the difference that I'm seeing in how I'm sharing with all of you this evening is that in talking about resilience and talking about impermanence and an impermanence practice today, I'm actually really focusing on more of the things that we perceive to be difficult or negative and less on the things that we perceive to be good and happy. And the reason is because we don't usually need resilience, a form of strength to adapt to things that make us happy, right? However, I do think it's important to point out that when we think about equanimity is that being with emotions, whether they seem to be emotions that are, difficult or easier. So I would say resilience is part of equanimity, but the whole of equanimity is the recognition of, again, what we consider difficult versus what we consider easy. And if I could come from a place of equanimity, I wouldn't have to say difficult or easy. I would just say, these are things that are arising. These are things that are arising in me, right? So I call them my 12 wise teachers, and Bhante Sumekta, who is behind our programming tonight, he was one of them. And another of the 12 wise teachers was Timber Hawkeye. And when I interviewed these 12 wise teachers, it was to have some really good discussions around experiences with death and grief and what was helpful, what helped them, what experiences did they have in life, when did they first learn about death, how did they handle it, what do they recommend now, what brings them peace now. So Timber Hawkeye is a young man who was one of the 12 wise teachers whom I spoke with. And as part of our discussion, as we were talking about, the difficulty of navigating grief, he brought me this equation: pain plus resistance equals suffering. And that's that resistance, that's that clinging or that aversion, right? So like the me not liking that my niece returned to the hospital. If I really go too far with that and I either have an aversion to it, like, no, I don't want to think about it, I don't want that to happen, that can't be true, or even I have clinging to the, no, that's not how it's supposed to be, I'm bringing myself more suffering. I'm bringing myself more suffering. And so my corollary to what he said is pain plus resilience equals less suffering. And we could even, I guess, put in, the pain plus the acceptance, but that's that resilience, that ability to accept the change, adapt and thrive, that will bring us to a place of less suffering. I always think of, when I have this discussion, I think so often of my own father. Now, my father was not a Buddhist, but you don't have to be a Buddhist to have acceptance and to have resilience and to manage and learn to live with impermanence. You just express it differently. So my dear father, he had lung cancer, and he knew that it was terminal. He was going to die. And he was very good about having good discussions with us around the fact that he was going to die. Not in, he wasn't dramatic, I'm dying, but he was very open about the fact that this is how this is going to go. Well, one of the many things I admired about him through this process of preparing for his own death was that he would say, I never ask why me. That's what he said. He said, I never ask why me. I really just think, why not me? And he didn't mean like, why not me? I deserve this. I was a smoker. It's my fault. He wasn't beating himself up. He was just acknowledging this is something that happens. It happens to lots of people. Why wouldn't it happen to me? Why couldn't it happen to me? And so in his way, he was very resilient, and he was able to see himself, to the end, and all of us with him to his end, from a place of less suffering, So that's my wish for all of us, is that, pain plus resilience equals less suffering. Let's have that. Well, how, right? So I'm talking a lot about having an impermanence practice and accepting impermanence and how that helps us build a resilience and the value of resilience. Let's talk about the how. And I'd like to share with you some ideas or some tips for how you might consider creating your impermanence practice or adding to your impermanent practice if you already have one. All right. Your Buddhist practice gives you what you need to do this, to build your resilience. It's already in our teachings, right? The Four Noble Truths remind you there's dissatisfaction or suffering, and that you control your own level of dissatisfaction through clinging and aversion. Okay, this is not a statement of blame. This is not blame. This is an observation of who we are. This is what the Buddha saw in us as humans. This is why he taught us this. So don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Please, because that's not going to be helpful, right? So when you can accept this truth, the truth of suffering and the truth of, attachment and aversion, it's going to be easier for you to navigate impermanence, because you can accept it and you can see it as something that will come without seeing it as something like, no, I don't want it, right? Okay. Start small. Now, you don't have to go right to, there's death. I'm going to die. People I love are going to die. If you're ready for that, beautiful. If you're not ready for that, also beautiful. You are beautiful where you are. So you can benefit from reflecting upon the truth that there's suffering, the source of that suffering, wanting things, wanting to be with certain people, wanting other people to go away, wanting certain outcomes, not wanting other things. Again, maybe it's your favorite ice cream. Yes, I like ice cream. You can tell. You don't have to make another choice. So start small, because again, every day through the course of the day, we have all these opportunities. Maybe some of them are so small we miss them, right? We know the big things like, oh, my car won't start. Oh, I didn't get to work on that project. Oh, I didn't win that proposal, whatever it is. Oh, that person doesn't want to spend time with me. We know the big things. Let's start with the small things. It's like, I don't know, it's a new year, so I don't know how many of you are starting a new exercise routine, going back to the gym. Well, if you haven't exercised for a while, maybe don't go run 10 miles the first day. Maybe don't go lift 200 pounds at the gym the first day. Do what makes sense. Start small. And so when I'm saying start small, that also really works together with meet yourself where you are. Another one of my 12 wise teachers that I got to interview, you may know her, Venerable Karma Lekshe Somo. And when we were speaking, something she said to me, she said, we were talking about, people having grief and how to work and help with others. And she said, we need to meet people where they are. And I remember thinking that, and I thought, yeah, that's right. You need to meet people where they are. And later, I thought about it more, and I realized, I'm people. I'm a person. Oh my gosh, I also need to meet myself where I am. And I'm sure she was probably hoping that later I would catch on with that lesson, right? But she said it so tactfully to me, meet other people where they are. But again, I'm people, you're people. So meet yourself where you are. And what that means is you don't have to tell anybody, but if where you are is that if your coffee isn't ready in the morning, you feel anger, that's where you are. And going back to, there's no blame, there's no shame, and what a great place to start. What a great place to start with your impermanence practice is with the disappointment that you expected your coffee to be ready and you are clinging to the idea of that cup of coffee and you didn't get it, and now you're angry. Beautiful place to start. So yes, start small and meet yourself where you are. Because things are always changing, and the more that we hang on to our perceptions of how things must be, the more difficult our lives become. So, if you really do experience strong negative outcomes over the coffee, think about what that did to your day. So notice how this impacts you, how it impacts your feelings, how the rest of your day goes. How does it feel in your body, right? So some of you do a practice where you do a body scan, right? How does this feel in your body? Do you feel clenched up? Do you feel like you get red and hot? Sometimes when I get upset, I turn red and I get very hot. Do you feel dizzy? Maybe your blood pressure has gone up. Notice it. Notice the tension you feel. Maybe the hard feelings you have for that coffee shop for not being open and not having your coffee. How dare they? You're a loyal customer. What are they thinking? Right? So do you go down a path of upsetting and building a story? Where do you go? And does this interrupt your day? Does it impact your relationship with others throughout the day? There's a lot. So yes, please, I'm asking you to do some noticing. What is this like? What does this feel like? And as you're doing this, seek to be non-judgmental. Specifically, another way maybe I could have said this is self-compassion. Self-compassion. Because again, there's no blame that we have. There's no shame around the fact that we experience suffering because of clinging and aversion. We know it, which is why we have a path away from it, which is why we're building this impermanence practice, which is why we start where it makes sense, where we meet ourselves where we are, and we notice our reactions to impermanence throughout the day. And again, seeking to be non-judgmental, because beating yourself up because you got upset over a cup of coffee is not helping you, right? That's not helping you. It's a roadblock. It's a roadblock to our own development. So, you're gonna figure it out. Practice acceptance. This is where me and my overuse, this is how it is. This is circling back to that phrase. You can see I have an attachment to that phrase, don't I? I'm really clinging to that phrase. Practice acceptance. The coffee shop is closed. Okay, the coffee shop is closed. Now, will you maybe between accepting it's closed, knowing it's closed and accepting it's closed, have a little minute of anger or upset or disappointment? Sure you will. And then depending on, I'll say the size of the point of impermanence that you're working with, you will have emotions that will rise and fall accordingly. That's okay. Notice them, feel them, and come to a practice place of acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean you don't do anything about it. So like with the car, say like your car breaks down. To practice acceptance in that moment doesn't mean, okay, my car's broken down. I'm going to leave it by the side of the road and I'm going to walk away from it and I'm never going to use it again. Acceptance means to understand in that moment that you cannot use your car right now. You're probably going to need some help. And you might have to pay for some work on your car and to move forward. So as soon as we can get to a place of accepting whatever this thing was that we're, clinging to or pushing away, when we can accept that this impermanence has come to us, that's where we build our resilience. And that's where we can begin to move on. And that's the strength and that's the beauty. That's the beauty. So it's that practicing acceptance. This thing has happened. But again, practicing acceptance doesn't mean we don't make other plans. It doesn't mean we give up. It just means we kind of say, this happened, and now I will try this other thing. My niece is in the hospital. I'm afraid. I'm disappointed, and she's in the hospital, and I'm going to keep an open mind, and I'm going to keep in touch and see what I can learn about what's happening, because I cannot make her not be in the hospital. You might consider a mantra that you use throughout your day, or at the beginning of your day, or when you sit down to meditate, something to help remind yourself that you are using impermanence to build your resilience, to have a better experience on your path. That could even be your mantra, right? I'm using impermanence to build resilience, to proceed on my path. I think we all know what my mantra is, so I'm going to spare you and not say it again. But these are the tips. These are the steps I ask you to consider to bring into your day to create your impermanence practice. And there's something, speaking of impermanence, that I feel is very important to get out there. And I call it the promise of impermanence. There's a saying, so I'm going to not quote the Pali Canon right now. There's a saying, and I'm using it because it's very popular across our many cultures. And the saying is, and this too shall pass away. Now, I believe historically that this originated in Persia, many hundreds of years ago, with a Sufi poet. Some sources say Rumi, others do not. So I'm just going to go with a Persian Sufi poet. And this too shall pass away. In its original usage, this was like an elegant way of observing that both sorrows and joys would come and go, right? A description of the human condition. Now, in good times and in bad. Today, this saying exists in many cultures, and that's why I use it. So many cultures. And we sometimes will use it when a friend or a loved one is going through something difficult. We might say to them, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Or if I want to be closer to quoting the Pali Canon, I could say, everything that arises ceases. And we are not, I'll say, wrong to want to help our friends feel better when they're going through something difficult. We want people to go, we want our friends to have ease, right? We want our friends to not have suffering, and we want them to feel better. But this is not the promise of impermanence. This is not the promise of impermanence. Impermanence is not a reassurance that things will get better. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to be honest. It's not a simple reminder that change will come. Impermanence reminds us that form and consciousness will disintegrate. There's that. The big D, the big D. We come apart. We come apart. So when we can be resilient and we can accept impermanence, not because I think, oh, this is difficult, but tomorrow things will be better. What we want to remember, big picture, is everything that rises ceases. Sure, impermanence could mean if I have a stomach ache today, tomorrow I will feel better, and that is great. But the ultimate promise of impermanence, what we're really preparing for in our lives with our impermanence practice and with building our resilience, is that knowing that everything is in constant and that everything will disintegrate. We come apart, and the people we love will come apart. But when we start with a daily impermanence practice and we recognize these opportunities, then like I said about like the workout, the running and the lifting of the weights, you're building your strength, aka your resilience. And so as the promise of impermanence unfolds in your life, you're going to be more prepared, right? So being with your own suffering and noticing the feelings of discomfort and breathing through it is a good practice. And it also is good to remember, again, the promise of impermanence, because that's the practice that's going to help advance us in the world of being human and on our spiritual path. So, as we embrace impermanence, just know impermanence is here. It's not even, like I said, it's not coming, it's here. And having that impermanent practice, building your resiliency, and that resiliency can pave the way for equanimity, the part of equanimity that allows us to be with what others would consider to be unpleasant, difficult emotions and situations, and to just view them as part of what the Buddha taught us on how things are and how it helps us to advance on our spiritual path. So see, there's the practical side, this will help you get through your day. And then there's the big important side, which is this will get you through your lifetime. And if you come back, if you return to your next life. So impermanence is a gift. I think I said this at the beginning, the gift of impermanence. It's actually a gift. It might not always feel like a gift. It might feel like that gift somebody gives you where you open it and you look and you're like, thank you, I think, or, oh, more socks, or whatever it is that it's that gift that you didn't know you wanted, but you find yourself really being glad, ultimately being glad that you have, because you use it all the time and it really makes your conditions better. That's what impermanence is. It is that gift. And it's a good thing that we have this gift, because how else are we going to move forward, right? So thank you so much. And at this point, I've been talking a lot. And so I would love to hear from others or hear questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Meloni, for sharing. I think I would like to share my personal experience. It's almost been a year since my dad passed away. He had a stomach cancer. And I think during his lifetime, whenever he was diagnosed, we started learning a little bit more deeper about impermanence. So I think secretly or quietly, my dad was preparing for his own departing.
Yes.
But of course, he didn't really tell us because he's a man of a few words. So we didn't really know that. But then I think we kind of knew that he was preparing, but also at the same time he was very optimistic that he was gonna get better. And then now that he has passed, I find myself face like a lot of hard times where I sometimes I can't believe that he's gone. Does that mean that I still don't understand the meaning of impermanence?
No, it means that you're human, and that this is what I like to say. I feel like the way the Buddha taught us, he tried to teach us in a way that was as easy to understand as possible, because it's the doing. Like, you understand impermanence, and now you understood it before, but now you really understand it because you lost your beloved father, and that's really hard.
Yes.
Right? And when we love, most of us have some attachment in our love, and that's to be human. And so when we love and we have some attachment in our love, we will grieve, and that is okay. And we just want to accept that and be with it. Don't be, so there's that, like, be non-judgmental. Notice that, and every day it's going to be different. Like, some days you're going to get through your day and you'll think of your father once or twice with a smile. The next day you may cry and then smile. And then the next day, maybe nothing. But we will always miss the people we have loved. But as we go forward, how we miss them and how we feel will change. But it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's the human, it's part of being human. And it's part of your path, as difficult as it is. And I'm very sorry. It's part of our path to go through these challenges and learn from them and see what you're doing right now is you're becoming more resilient.
Yeah, sometimes my family and I, we look back and then, because we're so close together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes we all look back and then, or we talk to each other, wow, how could we be so strong, because dealing with the diagnosis was not easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like before he was sick, when we watch the news or when we watch like some documentaries
Mm-hmm.
with people facing terminal illness, we always wonder how can they be so strong, and we would even like make a comment, if we were in their place, we wouldn't probably be survived, like we
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't probably survive. But then here we are, sometimes my sisters and I, we talk to each other and then we
Mm-hmm.
were like, from day one death was diagnosed until us going through the doctor's appointments together,
Mm-hmm.
that clearly tells us that we're strong,
Yes. Yes.
because the diagnosis is not easy was not easy for us to accept, and also
No.
waiting for test results after test results. It was,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's pretty traumatizing.
It is so hard. But I want to point out what you said, accept. You accepted. You
Mm,
It was hard to wait for the test result. It was hard to get the result that wasn't what you wanted, but you accepted it.
mhm,
And so in doing that, you were practicing impermanence, you were building your resilience.
mhm.
And as going through that process together, you were growing stronger. You were going stronger. So, like, I know it might sound like a silly or frivolous analysis, but like that was like, when I say like the gym, lifting the weights and the running, going through that diagnosis and those appointments and those tests and the disappointments, that was building your strength.
Mhm.
And that's how, and that together, and you had together
Yes.
one another, and you were able to go through it.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's a very good point. And I'm really glad that you're sharing that with us too.
Thank you. I always appreciate that. I read one time the Dalai Lama made a comment that he said, I cried when my mother died.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, even I cried when my mother died. And it's like, okay.
So that's just us natural, as human being, right? We have feelings and
Mm-hmm.
so on, right?
Yeah. Even when when the Buddha went on, when you read in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, we can see that the monks, there were different levels of sadness, but there was sadness.
Mm-hmm.
There was sadness.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a question from Dhamma USA. Um, Many people have difficulty facing with the loss of their loved pets. What's your advice to them?
Well, I think that in this world, some of us have attachments to our pets that are similar to attachments to our loved ones. Um, one of my friends posted on social media that she was excited about staying home and having New Year's Eve with her dogs. So this is I'm trying not to say this out as the world. Here I go again. The world that we live in, and so I think at this point, when you lose a pet and you loved that pet, you want to acknowledge that you lost a sentient being that you loved, that it is nothing wrong or guilty about that, and to treat it like a grieving process, like you would for any other, and be with your feelings and acknowledge that you miss that dog, that cat, ferret, whatever your pet was. Just acknowledge that and treat. I think the treatment for grief for the pet, if your feelings are deep enough, is the same as any other grief, which is hard, which is to acknowledge that it's hard. Yeah. Thank you so much for asking that.
So, Dr. Meloni, so we're talking about impermanence, something that doesn't stay forever, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then when you're dealing with grief, I feel like the grief is like permanent, like it's lasting longer, like I'm going to deal with the grief, forever. That's how I feel sometimes.
That's a good point. Let's think about that. And there are times where I will say to people that once you begin to grieve, you're on a journey. You're on a grief journey.
Mm.
And so in some ways I say that our grief is always with us, but it changes. And so there's the impermanent part. So it's kind of like we look at our skin and say, I always have my skin, right? But then we know that the skin cells are turning over all the time and changing and things like that. Well, your grief is always changing. And so one day your grief will be the ability to look back and acknowledge how much you loved your father and tell a story about him and smile. There was a time where I couldn't share any of the stories about my father in any of my presentations without crying. And although that's okay to cry, I wasn't there. I didn't want that to distract from my, sharing with people. So your grief is going to stay with you and it's going to change. And so how you feel it is going to be impermanent.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Another question from Dhamma USA. What do you think of euthanasia? Like when the pet gets sick, for example, right? And then you just bring them to the doctor.
I didn't mention it during the presentation, but I'll mention it now. My husband, so 2 years after my father went through his lung cancer, my husband went through the same form of lung cancer, which was kind of weird. And he also passed away. But long before he was ever sick, he would always say that if he got terminal cancer, he would want to go to a state where euthanasia was allowed. And this always really upset me. Well, when it came time and he knew that he had terminal cancer, he had changed his mind and he felt that he needed to see his life through to its natural termination point. And this is a difficult topic because I never want anyone to feel judged or badly about a decision they've made, whether it was euthanasia, helping a family member pass on, or, if we go back to the pets example, the pets, I never want someone to feel badly about that decision. I want us all to think very carefully about our decisions and the impact it has on our karma and our future lives, because I am a Buddhist who believes in rebirth. And I think we want to be very careful about the karma that we create and how we participate in the karma of others. So that's what I have to say about that. Thanks.
So when my dad was sick, Dr. Meloni, our pet, our beloved family dog, actually got diagnosed with cancer as well.
Oof.
So it was really hard. 2022, 2021, and 2022 was tough for us.
I'm so sorry.
And we were thinking about the karma, because my dog was not getting any better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then at the same time he was suffering,
Mm-hmm.
but then because we're a Buddhist, we're thinking about this impact of karma. Okay, if we euthanize the dog, what
Mm-hmm.
will happen to my dad later, down the
Mm-hmm.
road, because we're pretty close again. So
Yes.
we kind of took it one day at a time. We treated the dog as long as we could,
Mm-hmm.
while treating my dad also in the hospital. And my dad was able to pass on naturally after a year battling the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then surprisingly, our dog was still like, staying on, like holding on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the cancer was not treatable, and we were just basically trying to kept him like comfortable, and then consult with doctors, consulted with Buddhist monk. And finally, there was a day where he couldn't eat anymore, and then
Mm-hmm.
that was when we decided to bring him to the doctor.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
it was a tough decision, because up to that moment we were
Mm-hmm.
still thinking, okay, if we brought the dog to the doctor, well, is that the same thing as us killing him? But at the same time, we thought about the fact that the dog was suffering, and there
Yes.
was nothing else the doctor could do.
Right.
So it's either you longer the suffering for the dog, or you let the doctor give you advice on what to do.
Right.
hmm So that's, yeah.
It's not easy. I've mostly had cats. When I was a kid, we had a dog. We had a couple of dogs and we had a cat. As an adult, I've mostly had cats. I have had in the last 10 years, I've had maybe 2 cats where they died
Mm-hmm.
naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've had 2 where I brought them to the vet and consulted. And it is very difficult. And so when I think of the situation where I went to the vet and the vet said, she's not getting better, she's suffering, and her organs are going to start shutting down. Um, yeah, as a Buddhist, that was a difficult decision for me because, again, I'm interfering in her karma. We could go round and round with that argument, right? But
Yeah.
was it her karma to be my cat and that I would have the vet do it? But anyway, I'm not going to do that. That's just a big circle.
Sure.
That's just a big circle. And yes, I did allow the vet to, have her suffering end. And it is a difficult thing. So that's what I did. I might do it again if I have another pet who's suffering. I don't know. And so I guess I need to work on building merit because of this thing that I've done. Just like I need to be, I think, doing good deeds and building merit in my life because I'm not a perfect person anyway.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think we have to think about our intention. So was my intention to end my discomfort because she was suffering, or was my intention to end her discomfort? There's a difference.
Yes.
And we need to develop some self-awareness and honesty about that.
Got you. Yep. That's exactly what we were going through. Intention, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think we have one more from Dhamma USA, and then I would like to pass on a question from my mother to you, and I think we can wrap it up. So what is your advice to those who have suicidal
tendencies?
suicidal tendency? Yes.
Do not go through this alone. Seek help. Tell people what you're feeling. Let people know. If you tell someone and you don't feel that they pay attention to you, keep finding the right person to talk to so that you do get attention, so that you can work on this with someone. And I think that when I say work on this, I think it's a spiritual issue, and I think it's a emotional mental issue. And so I think it's good to have a good spiritual teacher, and then also a excellent therapist or psychiatrist, because there's, you just, it's so important. Don't go through this on your own. And there are people who love you whether you feel that or not, and there are people who would miss you. And the path to the end of suffering isn't maybe what you're feeling it is when you're feeling suicidal. The path to the end of suffering is, even though it must be really, really difficult, the path to the end of suffering is to work again with your, spiritual teacher and your, mental, emotional, healthcare professional to help you with this.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. The one last question for you, Dr. Meloni, is that until right now, my mother, ever since my dad passed away, she would, because she's the person that misses him the most, right?
Yes, of course.
Yes, of course. And she would like imagine, she would feel sometimes when she's driving to work that my dad was sitting beside her. Or sometimes she feels, basically on another word, is that she often feels his presence. And she would talk to it, or talk to the I guess I can say the spirit.
Yes.
Or when she feels the presence, is that a normal thing to do in order for us to cope with grief, or is that considered mentally ill?
Well, if it's considered mentally ill, then your mother and I both need help.
Okay, that answers the question then.
Because the same thing happened to me, and it has happened to some of my friends.
Okay.
So when you feel like you want to talk to your husband, talk to your husband. It's okay. Don't cling to the idea of him still being here. As Buddhists, we want our deceased loved ones to move on. But if you feel the presence and you feel like you want to talk to them, talk to them. Because what we don't know if he hasn't moved on yet. The passing of time might be different where he is. But so if you don't walk around the house clinging to it and saying, "Where are you? I need to talk to you." It's okay.
Sure.
It's okay. It's part of the process of letting go, because you didn't stop loving him just because he died. And the relationship didn't end because he died. So you will work your way through that. And
Thank you so much.
Big hugs
Thank you so much.
Of course. Of course.
I hope Dhamma friends out there have a huge takeaway from this. I'm pretty sure what I've been asking you, most of other people out there experienced it as well. Because nobody lives forever.
Exactly.
I think we can conclude today's talk. Again, thank you for accepting our invitation, Dr. Meloni. And
It was my honor. Thank you.
I hope that we can have you again in the future for another,
Would love
talk.
to.
I would like to invoke blessings upon you for kindly accepting our invitation for today's talk. May you always be well, happy, and healthy. Let's also keep our palms together close to our heart and pray that by the power of all the dana, sila, bhavana activities that we all have performed during our lifetime and during our whole course of samsara, become one united power, and may it shared with all the celestial beings. May all the wonderful celestial beings, including respectful Brahmas and Devas and all sentient beings, receive this merit and share this merit and be well, happy, and healthy wherever they are. May all your departed ones also receive this merit and be well, happy, and healthy, safe wherever they are. May all of us be able to live life peacefully, comfortably, and with good health. May all of us and all sentient beings be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, the absolute peace and happiness at the end of our samsara. Bhavantu Sabha Mangalam, Rakantu Sabha Dewata, Sabha Buddhanu Bhavena, Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Bhavantu Sabha Mangalam, Rakantu Sabha Dewata, Sabha Dhammanu Bhavena, Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Bhavantu Sabha Mangalam, Rakantu Sabha Dewata, Sabha Sanghanu Bhavena, Sada Soti Bhavantu Te. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a great day and see you all again, Dhamma friends, next week at the same time. Bye.